Mr. Vice President and Mrs. Pence, welcome to Ashraf-3, home to the Iranian people's resistance. I want to start with a memory from Ashraf in Iraq. In the attacks on Ashraf on July 28 and 29, 2009, we had 13 martyrs and 505 wounded. Most of those injured are here. 2 days later, the Friends of the Iranian Resistance at the US Congress presented the resolution 704, supported by a bipartisan majority. The resolution strongly condemned the massacre of Ashraf residents and demanded safeguards for their well-being. The resolution urged the US President to take all necessary steps to support the commitments of the United States under international law and treaty obligations to ensure the physical security and protection of Camp Ashraf residents. I want to mention the names of a few of the signatories to that resolution. Congressman Mike Pence, a Republican Party, Congressman Mike Pence, a Republican Party leader and member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. The late Congressman John Lewis, Representatives Ed Towns, and Sheila Jackson-Lee from the Democratic Party. Judge Tetpo and Dana Rohrabacher, and Iliana Roslehtinen from the Republican Party. And today, after 13 years, on behalf of all Ashraf residents, I would like to say thank you, Vice President Mike Pence and your friends, for stopping that carnage. Now, your visit to Ashraf-3 coincides with the Iranian people's uprisings. Various sectors of people are rising up in different cities, including Tehran, Ahvaz, Isfahan, Shush, Zanjan, and Rasht, and the other cities. The resistance units are also fighting across the country. 3 days ago marked the beginning of the 42nd year of our resistance against the Mullah's regime. On June 20, 1981, Khomeini ordered his troops to open fire to the MEK's 500,000-strong demonstration in Tehran and turn it into a mass killing. The same night, mass executions began without even asking the names of the victims. Moments ago, in the Museum of Resistance, you saw a small part of the Iranian people's suffering under the mullahs' rule and also their resistance against the regime. 1,000 political prisoners tortured by the Shah's regime or religious dictatorship are present in this hall today. Some have lost 10 or 12 members of their families. You know about Khomeini's fatwa on the execution of all MEK who stood their ground. This, no doubt, is evidence of a strong and relentless resistance to establish a free and democratic Iran. You rightly said last October in Washington, the atrocity of 1988, the fatwa, what was issued by the Ayatollah, resulting in the murder of 30,000 members of the MEK, was ultimately about a religion and a belief that people who believed in liberty and in freedom for Iran did not have the religion that was acceptable to the tyrants in Tehran. The MEK is also proud of stopping Khomeini's expansionism war in 1988. He had been waging war for 8 years with the slogan of capturing Quds via Karbala. But in 1988, the National Liberation Army forced Khomeini, in his own words, to drink the poison of a ceasefire in the war. A war with 1 million loss of lives, 2 million disabled and wounded, 4 million homeless, and more than $1 trillion of damage only on the Iranian side. The MEK was also the first to expose the regime's nuclear projects since 1991. In 2002, they uncovered the regime's secret sites and informed the world of its bomb-making project. Without the Iranian resistance's revelations, the mullahs would have obtained the bomb years ago. But today I want to stress on 3 points. First, the objective conditions of Iranian society. Second, the alternative. And third, the international community's approach to religious fascism in Iran. First, the world is witnessing that conditions for change exist in Iran and people are ready for change. Protests are sparking with increasing intensity across the country. On the other hand, the regime has no answer except increasing repression, executions, or torture in its prisons. The people of Iran have the right to resist. Like the wars of independence in America, the mullahs have occupied our country. People say in their slogans, our enemy is here. They lie when they say it's America. The Iranian resistance is a historical example of the fact that the resistance of a nation can change the course of history towards freedom. Today, we see this experience in Ukraine. Indeed, if the people of Ukraine themselves had not taken up arms, what was the guarantee to protect their country? External conditions are only effective when the fighting force on the ground is ready to pay the price. In the past year, the MEK resistance units in Iran launched more than 2,350 anti-repression campaigns that paved the way for uprisings across the country. Second, believing in a democratic Islam, the MEK is an effective antithesis to the mullahs' sinister ideology. Look at what the mullahs have done in the name of Islam in Iran's neighboring countries, from Iraq to Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Yemen. But our Islam rejects tyranny and misogyny. It does not ignore the rights of oppressed ethnic groups. We do not distinguish between the ways of Christ, the way of Moses, and the way of Muhammad. By raising the banner of the separation of religion and state, this alternative is a solution to establish democracy in Iran and an obstacle to Islamic fundamentalism in the entire region. The mullah's regime has made every effort to cover up this fact. The demonization of the Iranian resistance, the censorship of its news, and denying of the popular support for resistance are all intended to cover up the truth. Now that all illusions about any reform within the regime in Iran have disappeared, the mullahs invest on a non-existent Shah, divert the uprisings, but you rightly said, I'm confident I speak for the views of tens of millions of Americans, and I tell you with certainty that the American people support your goal of establishing a democratic, secular, non-nuclear Iranian republic. Yes, Tehran rulers are at their weakest point. They face the Iranian people's uprising for change. We can and must free Iran, the Middle East, and the world of the evil nuclear mullahs. The November 2019 uprising with its rebellious cities and the Army of Freedom showed the way to all. Third, today, the world clearly sees that the policy of appeasement of the mullahs has failed. This is a regime that gives a bomb to its diplomat to blow up the gathering of the Iranian resistance, where hundreds of distinguished international personalities were present. This is a regime that disabled IAEA cameras at its nuclear sites and uses more advanced centrifuges. Yes, this regime has never given up on their quest for nuclear weapons as a guarantee for their survival. This is part of Raisi's mission. The international community must activate the trigger mechanism. The Iranian regime's dossier of human rights, violations, and terrorism, particularly the massacre of political prisoners and the crackdown on protesters in November 2019, must be referred to the UN Security Council, and the regime's leader must be prosecuted for committing genocide and crimes against humanity. If the regime does not intend to provoke wars, one army is enough. Therefore, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, must be dismantled. Like Ukraine, the Iranian people and their resistance deserve international recognition and support. The war of Iran's rebellious youth against the terrorist IRGC to overthrow the regime must be recognized. Mr. Vice President and Mrs. Pence, Today, Iran's freedom fighters who have fought against the Shah's regime and the religious dictatorship welcomed you to Ashraf-3. Tomorrow, a free Iran will welcome you for standing by the Iranian people and resistance. Thank you and God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that warm welcome, Maryam Rajavi. It is a great honor for me and my wonderful wife to be here at Ashraf-3 in Albania, where the eternal flame of freedom in Iran burns bright. And it's a privilege for us to be here in the home of thousands of courageous Iranian men and women, a home of peace and prosperity, a home of hope for a free and democratic Iran. You know, I've traveled more than 5,000 miles from my home in Indiana to be here today because we share one common cause: the liberation of the Iranian people from decades of tyranny and the rebirth of a free, peaceful, prosperous, and democratic Iran. And I want to thank you all, so many of whom have gone through such personal hardship. Thank you for standing strong in the name of freedom. This is the first opportunity I've had to visit Albania since completing my term as Vice President of the United States. And while I no longer speak on behalf of the American government, I do speak with confidence regarding the views of millions of Americans. And I can say to all of those gathered here, including many of my fellow Americans, that the American people are with you as you stand and labor for freedom in Iran. I know in my heart of hearts, for having served among them in the Congress and as a governor and as the vice president, that the American people support your goal of establishing a secular, democratic, non-nuclear Iranian republic that derives its powers from the consent of the governed. You know, many American citizens trace their family roots to Iran. More than 1.5 million Americans were actually born in Iran, which means the United States today is home to more members of the Iranian diaspora than any other nation on earth. And America has been incredibly enriched by the contributions of Iranian Americans to our culture, our economy, and our society. Most Iranian Americans came to our country following the tragic events after the revolution in 1979. They chose to make the United States their home because they knew that America is and will always be the land of liberty, holding aloft the flame of freedom for all to behold. We're proud and grateful for our Iranian-American community. But along with them, our hearts are with those that were left behind, for whom life has been a misery and a hardship, day in and day out. In ways that you understand that we never fully will. But your witness here at Ashraf-3 and your voice on the world stage is more important than ever before. What the Iranian people have endured since 1979 will be recorded by history as one of the great tragedies of the modern era. As a former elected leader, as an American citizen, and as a man of faith who believes that all are created in the image of God, the Iranian people have always had a special place in my heart. I'm deeply humbled that Maryam Rajavi began her remarks today reflecting on my work. Because long before I was vice president in 2009, like so many other Americans, I remember watching with great hope and anticipation as the people of Iran rose up to claim their birthright of freedom. In 2009's uprising, millions of courageous young men and young women filled the streets of Tehran and Tabriz, and what appeared for all the world to be in every city and village in between, denouncing the clearly fraudulent elections and demanding an end to decades of repression. Those brave protesters looked to the leader of the free world for support. But as I saw firsthand as a member of Congress, then the President of the United States remained silent. But I knew where the heart of the American people was. And so as a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I saw that lack of action for what it was: an abdication of American leadership as courageous Iranians took to the street on behalf of freedom. The American cause is freedom, and in this cause we must never be silent. So to give the American people a voice where our leaders were silent, I introduced a resolution expressing support for the courageous Iranian protesters. And I'm proud to say, with the support of the late John McCain, former Senator Joe Lieberman, and Congressman Howard Berman, the House and the Senate passed that resolution almost unanimously, and with such overwhelming and bipartisan support. The Obama-Biden administration joined the chorus at last and supported the cause of freedom that had taken to the streets of Iran. But sadly, the Obama-Biden administration's half-hearted support and refusal to act ultimately emboldened Iran's tyrannical leaders to crack down on that dissent. And as many of you in this room experienced firsthand, that 2009 uprising was ruthlessly put down. As we witnessed that horror, I said at the time that we were witnessing a Tiananmen in Tehran, and so we were. But the enduring hope for a free Iran can never be extinguished. That's more clear to us today visiting here at Ashraf-3 than it's ever been. For I see in each one of your eyes and the countenance and confidence on your face, the people of Iran will someday be free. I believe it. And that same resolve has been evident in the continuation of nationwide uprisings since 2017, including in November of 2019, when the Iranian regime fired on peaceful protesters, killing 1,500 in cold blood. Now, under the Trump-Pence administration, I am proud that in our time, America did not turn a deaf ear to the pleas of the Iranian people. We did not remain silent in the face of Iranian regime's countless atrocities. We stood with freedom-loving people in Iran. We canceled the disastrous Iran nuclear deal, which flooded the regime's coffer with tens of billions of dollars and pallets of cash, money that the regime used to repress its own people and support deadly attacks across the wider world. We imposed new and crippling sanctions on Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard. We launched what came to be known as a campaign of maximum pressure, punishing the regime for its belligerent behavior and the assault on its own citizens. And we vigorously enforced those sanctions to bring Iran's oil exports to near zero during our administration and deny the regime its principal source of revenue. We also called on free nations of the world to stand with us, to stand with the Iranian people. We encouraged world leaders to condemn Iran's unelected dictators and defend the Iranian people's unalienable right to determine their own destiny. In no uncertain terms, under our administration, we told the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Russia, China, that the JCPOA was a dangerous mistake that would cost the world dearly. And we made it abundantly clear that America would never allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. We confronted the regime's malign activity across the region. We isolated Iran as never before, empowering the people of Iran to step up and grasp for freedom even more. And we didn't hesitate to take decisive action against those that the regime used to perpetrate violence against innocent civilians in Iran, across the region, and against American service members. When I was there, when the order was given, and the head of the Quds Force, Qasem Soleimani, is gone. As I said, we isolated Iran as never before. We brought together Arab nations with Israel for a historic Abraham Accord. And then a change came in America. And now President Biden and his administration are threatening to unravel all the progress we made in marginalizing the tyrannical regime in Tehran. It seems for all the world that this American administration is working overtime to unwind the progress that we made. They're working to actually restore the Iran nuclear deal, putting Tehran back on the fast track to obtaining a nuclear weapon. In fact, the Biden administration recently admitted that under a restored nuclear deal, Iran would be capable of amassing enough nuclear fuel for a bomb in less than 1 year, even faster than what was allowed under the previous deal. They recently waived sanctions imposed by the Trump-Pence administration related to the regime's nuclear activities. And additionally, the Biden administration has actually worked closely with Russia to revive talks on the Iran nuclear deal with Tehran. It's extraordinary to think, as Vladimir Putin's unprovoked and unjustified war in Ukraine rages, an American administration is working with the perpetrators of that war to reopen a deal that would only strengthen the tyrants in Tehran. Well, I simply say to you as an American, these actions are dangerous. Appeasement has never worked and never will. A renewed nuclear deal with Iran won't lead to peace and stability. It will lead to more terrorism, death, and destruction. A renewed deal with Iran won't block Iran's path to a nuclear bomb. It will pave a path in gold. And a renewed Iran nuclear deal won't benefit the people of Iran in any way. It will merely empower and enrich a corrupt regime that has tormented and tortured the Iranian people for generations. My faith teaches that we are to abhor what is evil and cling to what is good. So today, simply as an American, we call on the Biden administration to stand with the people of Iran, stand up for the cause of freedom and justice. Today, we call on the Biden administration to immediately withdraw from all nuclear negotiations with Tehran, voice support for the organized opposition in Iran, and make it clear that America and our allies will never permit the regime in Tehran to obtain a nuclear weapon. You know. Peace is only possible through strength. With President Biden's re-embrace of the JCPOA, with new concessions offered to the tyrants in Tehran with each passing day, with the virtual abandonment of our ally Israel and the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, the adversaries of freedom are sensing weakness in the American administration. They've been emboldened to test our resolve. And let me be clear. There's one person responsible for the merciless war being waged in Ukraine, and that is Vladimir Putin. And Putin must be held to account. But there is no doubt that going hand in hand to the regime in Tehran, reopening the Nord Stream 2 pipeline to Russia, the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, have sent emissions that have emboldened those who would use violence to perpetrate their political goals. Weakness arouses evil. And the evil rising in Iran and around the world speaks to the weakness projected by the current American administration. But let there be no doubt, whatever message may be coming from the current American government, the American people are strong, and the American people stand for freedom. And my countrymen stand with you in your goal of establishing a secular, democratic, non-nuclear Iranian republic that derives its just powers from the consent of the governed, and the American people always will. And I hope that is an encouragement to you. You who have suffered so much and endured so much. You know, it's an old saying that it's always darkest just before the dawn. And I believe the brutality that we're witnessing in this regime is evidence that the Iranian regime has never been weaker than it is today. 4 of 5 Iranians now live below the poverty line. Corruption is at an all-time high. And it's clear the Iranian people are fed up and ready for change. The regime's sole focus now appears to be maintaining its precarious grip on power, which grows weaker by the day. I believe that's why the regime took the extreme step of disqualifying virtually all opposition members of parliament in the 2020 elections. But the greatest evidence for the growing weakness of the Iranian regime is the recent selection of Ebrahim Raisi to serve as Iranian president. As you all know, and history records, 30 years ago, Raisi was in charge of the Ayatollah's death squads. We walk through the museum today where that history is recorded. Raisi is a brutal mass murderer responsible for the 1988 massacre of 30,000 political prisoners. His selection as president was intended to quash internal dissent and intimidate the people of Iran into remaining silent. But it's backfired. The good people of Iran will never be silent in the face of evil. And neither will we. Many of you whose families suffered under Raisi know full well. You lost loved ones. You lost your lives in Iran. You bear the scars of his brutality in your bodies. Some of you barely escaped, I learned today. So today I join you in pledging that Raisi's crimes will not go unpunished. Ebrahim Raisi is unworthy of leading the great people of Iran. He must be removed from office by the people of Iran, and he must be prosecuted for the crimes against humanity and genocide that he perpetrated 30 years ago and every day since. Today, the resistance movement in Iran has never been stronger. It's been inspiring for me to learn today, even more. Resistant units in Iran, a center of hope for the Iranian people, an engine for change from within during the uprisings and continued protests. And every day, it's clear they're growing stronger, while the regime grows weaker. Today, teachers, workers, retirees are courageously taken to the streets. Protests that used to be isolated and sporadic quickly spread to multiple cities. You know, hope is a flame in the heart of freedom-loving men and women. And as I heard again today, that flame is burning brighter than ever before, thanks to all of you. So I came here today simply to say we stand unequivocally on the side of the Iranian people. You know, one of the biggest lies the ruling regime has sold the world is that there's no alternative to the status quo. But there is an alternative. Well organized, fully prepared, perfectly qualified, and popularly supported alternatives. And let me thank Maryam Rajavi and all of those gathered here at Ashraf-3 for offering hope to your people in Iran. Your resistance units, commitment to democracy, human rights, and freedom for every citizen is a vision for a free Iran and an inspiration to the world. Maryam Rajavi's 10-point plan for the future of Iran will ensure the freedom of expression, the freedom of assembly, freedom for every Iranian to choose their elected leaders. And it's a foundation on which to build the future of a free Iran. The regime in Tehran wants to trick the world into believing that the Iranian protesters want to return to the dictatorship of the Shah as well. But I want to assure you, we're not confused by their lies. So let me ask you all right here, for all the world to hear, do the Iranian people want to replace one dictator with another? Or do the Iranian people want to live in freedom and democracy for all the people of Iran? I stand before you today to say our greatest hope and our fervent prayer will always be for a peaceful, cooperative, and harmonious coexistence with Iran and all the sovereign nations of the world. The United States will always be ready to embrace peace with all those who seek it, proven by the historic Ebrahim Accords, signed in the waning days of our administration. But I believe the most important steps that my country can take to promote peace in the Middle East are to stand with our allies, Israel, and peace-loving freedom nations, to continue to isolate the tyrannical regime in Tehran, and to increase support for the organized resistance among the people in Iran. You are the ones who stand for peace, and America must stand with you. We know that Iran can be a great nation once again. We know the rich history of Iran, which stretches back to time immemorial. The story of a people who have made great contributions to art, music, literature, science, and commerce. And we know that the story of this great people is far from over. As President Ronald Reagan said, quote, "There is no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women." We know the vast untapped potential of the Iranian people. In my own country, we've seen all they can achieve when they're free to pursue their hopes and dreams. All free nations of the world must continue to support the Iranian people in their calls for freedom and demand that Iran's leaders cease their dangerous and destabilizing actions at home and respect their people and their unalienable rights. We stand with the proud people of Iran because it is right, and because the regime in Tehran threatens the peace and security of the world. But be encouraged. No oppressive regime can last forever. For inside every human heart is an unquenchable fire that burns to be free. As our founding documents say, we believe we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. But I believe in the heart of every human there is a desire to be free. As my faith tradition says, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. So have faith, my friends, that just as the Soviet Union collapsed under the weight of its own evil, so too will be the fate of the oppressors in Iran. The day will come when the Ayatollahs release their iron-fisted grip on Iran and her people, and a new glorious day will dawn. A bright future will begin, ushering an era of peace, prosperity, stability, and freedom for the good people of Iran and the world. So help us God.
It is a great honor for us today to see you in Ashraf-3. No wonder we are here together, because as I once heard you quoting from the Bible, it was for freedom that Christ set us free. The sacred word of freedom is the message of all the great prophets of God, and I know you strongly believe in it. So we and our people in Iran have been fighting for freedom for decades as well. So, as I said, no wonder we are here together. Together, we'll get through this. Together, no matter what it is. There is no valley too deep, no river too wide, no mountain too steep we can't climb. Together, we got all we need. Together, just watch and see. We're going to make it come what may. Nothing can break us if we stay together. This was a part of the lyrics of a song called Together, composed by your favorite musician, Stephen Curtis Chapman, which our musician and our music group in Ashraf-3, managed by my colleague Ruzbe, who plays the piano, together with the great Albanian musicians today, presented to you. After that, we invite you to listen to a short piece of Iranian music, which is played by the combination of traditional instruments and the classical orchestra. Hope you enjoy them. Thank you.
Thank you.